This is The Countdown, discussing tomorrow's news today as our top guests tackle the issues that matter with a sharp take on every story. And now, here are your hosts, Andrew Weeks and Onyx Duncan.
All right, a very good morning to you and welcome to another edition of The Countdown. We do apologize for our late start. We are having a lot of things happening this morning. It is the 1st of December and we are coming to you live from Providence Stadium. I'm here at the cricket ground, but we decided to do it right here because a lot of things, like I said, is happening this morning. And we want to ensure that you get the information that you need to have to take you to the next week. And so, welcome to our broadcast. And if you hear any little noise in the background, it's because the commentator booth is just next door. But we are so happy that you could join us this morning. We have Dr. Hinds, the presidential candidate for the WPA, is my guest. Onyx Duncan will come in a few. But we thank all of you for joining us. And so we're going to get right into our program with Dr. David Hinds. Dr. Hinds, good morning.
Good morning, Andrew.
It is kind of, deja vu, where I usually be behind the scenes doing politics one-on-one, but now I am in front of the cameras interviewing you at this hour. So thank you so much for accepting our invitation to be a part of the program. How are you doing?
I'm doing all right. I was just about to say that even long before you start helping me with Politics 101, you used to interview me 10 years ago.
News.
Safe 2 News. And
yes. Yeah.
And all of that. So you're a veteran in the business.
Yeah. Yes. Dr. Hinds, let me start off first with my first question. Everybody's talking about the WPA. The PVP is telling us, or telling Guyana, that the WPA has no membership. There's nobody there. It's only a 3-man, 4-man party. And that, there's nothing really going on. But I wanna do something that may jog your memory, and those of you viewing here this morning, about your party, because a lot of folks are forgetting to. They are forgotten that the WPA has been in existence since 1974.
Yes.
Right. And that the party has been in election since then. Tell us, Dr. Hinds, how is the WPA today, and who are its new leaders, etc.?
Well, look, the WPA is, as you said, has been around since 1974, and we're still here. I am still here. I am very active in Guyanese politics. We continue to be active in the country's politics. Now, in a society like ours, that is a bifurcated society, where our electoral politics are driven by our 2 major parties, third parties, as we call them, or other parties, or smaller parties, whatever name we give to them, there's always been this thing about whether they exist or don't exist, you see? And one doesn't bother with that. Look, if a party has 1 member and that party has something to say, it is the democratic right of that party to say it. And it is the right of the people to hear what that party has to say. And so if we measure parties by how many votes they got to the last election, then we are robbing our country of a lot of its intellectual and political resources. And the WPA is not bothered by all of that issue. We continue to make our contribution to Guyanese society. The most talked about issue in Guyanese politics today is what is called the cash grant or cash transfer or cash handout, whatever you call it. It is the most popular issue. And it was put on the agenda by who? By which party? According to Jack Dio, the defunct party. How can a defunct party put on the agenda the most talked about issue? And that is the cash transfer. You know what? We have been trying to get our people interested in oil and gas. We're trying to get them interested in the contract. We're trying to get them interested in this, interested in that. The first time our people en masse have become interested in an active way in anything to do with oil and gas is on the question of the cash grant. And although we may not be a party that got 1 million votes at the last election, we have put on the table, we have put on the agenda an issue that has galvanized the Guyanese society. And that is, one of the most important things about political contestation. It is not just the number of votes that you get, but how many people in the society you influence to get involved in the process. And we are proud. We are proud as a party to have over 50 years contributed tremendously to the political conversation in this country. You asked the question about our leadership. We come out of a tradition, what is called the New Left tradition of the 1960s and 70s. And these were radical political parties that questioned the status quo, questioned the way political power was being organized, questioned the way political party was being organized. And these parties turned their face away from the one-man leadership thing. So we came up with this notion of what is called collective leadership. So there was never any single leader, but collective leadership. And then we put it out in the form of co-leadership, whether they're 2 people or 4 people as the co-leaders. And it was a novel idea at the time, but we live in a society in Guyana and the Caribbean where people have continued to respond to a single leader. I notice you are describing me here today as the leader of the WPA, and that's what I'm talking about. I mean, that's our culture. That's part of our political culture. So what we did in the WPA is that we elected 4 co-leaders, Brother Takumo Gonse, who's well known, Brother Rohit Kadai, who's not so well known, one of our Indian Guyanese brothers, and myself, 3 co-leaders. I said 4, sorry, 3 co-leaders. And that is in keeping with the party's tradition of saying that we are not a one-man leader kind of party. But then I am named as the presidential candidate, which suggests first among equals, which I think is what the society respond as a single leader. So we are trying to straddle our traditional fidelity to a collective form of leadership, while at the same time recognizing that the society still responds to the single leader, the first among equals. So as presidential candidates, what we are saying is that I am part of a co-leadership, but that I am first among equals, so to speak. So it's a way of straddling the two.
So it is not necessarily that you It's a one-man show. It's a co-leadership.
But we recognize that in the wider society, people pick their leaders of parties. I mean, when Walter Rodney was alive, he was never elected as WPA leader. But the people always say Walter Rodney was the leader. They even said he was a founder. Walter Rodney was not even a co-founder of the WPA. WPA was founded in 1974. Walter Rodney joined when he came back to Guyana. He was not even a co-founder. But people say he's a founder. He's the leader. People talk about the PNC. The PNC, as a collective leadership, so far as I know, there's an executive and so on. But Aubrey Norton is the leader. He's elected as the leader. The AFC, Nigel Hughes. When you talk about the AFC, people talk about Nigel Hughes. And I suppose when people talk about today's WPA, they associate it with my name, so to speak. But I am not a single leader inside of the party. I am part of a co-leadership. But we do recognize that people would, decide who they think is the leader of the party, and that's their right.
So you have Professor Clive Thomas, leaders of the party. I'm not sure, Rupert Wupner-Ryan.
Dr. Rupert-Ryan is not well these days. He's still available to us when we need him, but he's not well. So he's not active in the day-to-day running of the party.
Yes. You have still alive and still kicking, UZ Guyana, still around as well, part of the party. And then you have some young ones like Kidaki Amsterdam and those other leaders, young guys, who the party is now having in the forefront as future leaders, I would want to say, of the WPA. I want to read something that I have found that, people may not know about, but it says here in one of my research, it says that WPA was established in 1974 as an alliance of the Working People's Vanguard Party, the African Society for Cultural Relations and Independent Africa. It says the Indian Political Revolutionary Associates and Ratoon, and became a political party in 1979. It did not run in the 1980s elections, but put forward candidates in the 1985 elections. Although it pulled out of the elections on election day, it still received 1.4% of the vote and won a single seat. And in 1992 elections, it increased its share of the vote by 2.0% and retained its seat in the National Assembly. And for the 1997 elections, it formed an alliance with the Ghana Labour Party, named the Alliance for Guyana. Although the alliance share of the vote dropped to 1.2%, it won one seat. And it says here as well, in 2001 election, WPA called allied with the Ghana Action Party, receiving 2.4% of the votes and 2 seats, and that party did not contest the 2006 election, although one of its members ran as part of the Alliance for Change. And in 2011 election, it was part of the Partnership for National Unity Alliance, which won 26 seats. Prior to the 2015 elections, the APNU formed a joint electoral list with the Alliance for Change, and the combined list won 33 seats, allowing the APNU leader, Mr. David Granger, to become the president. So it shows here that your party has a big stake in this whole electoral system, in this whole political system. And it's not just a fly-by-night party. You have Walter Rodney, the founder of the party, which the people love to jump and talk about, right? So the party is a big party. It has a big stake in the whole, gamut of political, the arena in the country. What do you say about that?
Yes, you can't write the political history of Guyana without taking into consideration the WPA. We played a big role in terms of mobilizing the society, putting ideas on the table, and so forth. So we are not as insignificant as people would want us believe. And if you're a PPP, you want WPA not to be significant, because there are things that WPA can say and the things that we do say that some other parties may not be able to say. You know, and you know, the PPP loves to talk about who rig elections. They are part of the rigging. You know, they don't talk about that, but they can't point the finger in WPA face and say we ever rig anybody election.
So, in other words, you can say that the WPA is a force to be reckoned with. You also, based on my research as well, according to the Moraro Wave report of August 10, 2024, it says that, and I quote, the WPA names presidential candidate U, which plans to reintroduce itself to Guyanese. It says the WPA feels that Dr. Hinds brings to the new roles a wealth of political experience and knowledge of Guyanese politics and society, and that the party said, and that although its daily program, Politics 101, the WPA believes that Dr. Hinds, has developed a political following which can help increase electoral support. It says here as well that for Dr. Hinds, one of my questions I have for you though is, although that report says that it can increase electoral votes, my question to you is, are you absolutely sure that because of you having your big followings on Politics 101, that indeed can turn into votes? The big following you have online could turn into big numbers for the 2025 elections? Do you think so?
No, I wouldn't put it that way. I think my program is a vehicle for engaging in political discussion and influencing people to either join the party or to support the party if it were to run in an election by itself or as part of a coalition. But your following on social media, it does not automatically translate into votes. You have to fight for votes, and the votes available to a third party or third parties in Guyana are not big, are not many. I would say about 75 to 80% of our voting population will vote either PNC or PPP. I think about 25%, maybe less, maybe a little bit more, but I would say 25, 20, 15% of the electorate is open to a party other than the PNC or the PPP. And so it is that share of the vote that a party like our party is going to be able to attract. Look, there are people who are dissatisfied with the big parties. This has always been so. Always been so. We've always had a small group of voters, a percentage of the votes that has been dissatisfied with the big parties. But people have to be rational. Because we have a winner-take-all system, you want to be sure that you maximize your vote, because only one party could win in a winner-take-all system. And so someone may be open to voting for an AFC or open to voting for the WPA, but on the day of the vote would say, look, those parties don't stand a chance of winning in this kind of system. And so I am going to vote for one of the larger parties. And it's because of the system. If we had a different system where at the end of the election, we have a national government, we don't have a winner that takes all, I think third parties like ours would do better, because people would know that they're not going to waste their votes, that at the end of the day, all parties would be in the government, would be at the table. But once you have a winner-take-all system where one party would win, the larger parties are likely to carry the big share of the vote. And that is why we in the WPA are saying coalition politics is the way to go. so that we are assuring our supporters that, look, if you vote for us, you're not voting for a loser because we are part of a larger coalition. And so therefore, when you vote for us, you're voting for a larger coalition, which stands a better chance of winning than if we were to run by ourselves.
Well, that's so true. That I know that our constitution framework does not cater yet, because I have a committee now putting in place to deal with constitution reform. Would you subscribe to a Switzerland model of government, where everybody sits at the table and decide who becomes the leader of the country? Do you subscribe to something like that, a Switzerland model? Because I hear Dr. Henry talks about this a lot of times in this presentation. Elaborate on that a little bit more for us as how Guyana could form that federation of government.
I'm a big supporter of the Swiss model. Switzerland is made up of different ethnic groups like Guyana. And what happens is that at the end of the election, each ethnic group is represented in what is called the presidency. So they have a 4-person presidency. And each president or co-president has a veto power. So if 3 of them agree on something and 1 doesn't agree, it doesn't go through. So it forces them to come to consensus. And then they divide the presidency in 4. So for the first quarter, 1 co-president is the president. For the second quarter, a second co-president, and third co-president, the fourth co-president. So it's quite a democratic system. And it ensures that all the ethnic groups and whoever they support, whichever party, sits at the table. And if we were to have that in Guyana, that would really democratize our country. It would take away this fear from people that they have to vote for 1 or 2 or the other party. And it will open up the system to more accountability, so that no one party would be able to control the country. No one party or ethnic group would be able to dominate the country. And we will have a consensus form of governance where we all agree on things before we put them through. So something like this cash transfer. In a place like Switzerland, if one of the parties puts it forward, the other 3 will have to agree. And if 3 of them agree and 1 says, no, they can't go through. And so they would have to come to consensus. Imagine if, we had that Swiss approach. The PPP said, we're going to give 100,000 to each voter because that's what they're doing. The WPA said, no, we want to give a 300,000 to each household. And the PNC says, we want to give 200,000 to each household. And the AFC says that we want to give, 400,000 to each household. Then we all sit down at the table and we put the 4 proposals on the table and we come to a consensus as to how much and whether it's a household or an individual. And so what you get there is the input and the agreement of all sectors of the society, and not one party or one party. The PPP is voted in by East Indians. That is a fact. And the PPP is going to speak first for East Indians. It is going to do what its supporters wants it to do. If the PNC is there, the PNC speaks for most African Guyanese. And they're going to put forth what they think African Guyanese would want. The AFC, I rather suspect, would have some African Guyanese support, some Amerindian support, and they're going to speak for that minority. And I rather think that we in the WPA have some support among African Guyanese who are not PNC. And we will speak for that community. And we put all of the table together and we come up with a nice package that everybody agrees with and everybody's happy with. It would be a blessed day for Guyana.
But Dr. Hinds, would you subscribe to have that put to the Constitutional Reform Committee to have that kind of government structure in place? Would you put that to them?
Yes, the last time the coalition put together a constitutional reform committee headed by Nigel Hughes, I appeared before that committee and I placed this suggestion or some form of it on the table. Unfortunately, that process did not go anywhere or go far. We're hoping that this process will go far, and I'm hoping to appear before that commission and to make suggestions as to how we can improve our governance system. We cannot have one party representing one ethnic group, representing one view of the world, imposing itself on the others in the world. Look, the winner-take-all majoritarian system assumes that all of us are on the same page. So that even when you lose, you know that the other party is not going to violate your rights because we all agree on the rights, we all agree on the system, we all agree on the political trajectory for the country. So that when one party wins, we don't feel that that party is going to dominate us. That is not the case in Guyana. We know those of us who are African Guyanese for the most part, those of us who support, the PNC, the AFC, the WPA, we cannot depend on the PPP to represent our views. We cannot. And so in order to represent our views and the views of our supporters, we have to be at the table. Because as we have noticed, the PPP violates the views of our supporters, violates their rights. And so we cannot depend on the PPP to govern in the interest of all. And the PPP supporters have every right to believe that the PNC or the AFC or the WPA will not govern in the interest of all of Guyana. They have a right to believe that. And so since people believe that no single party will govern in the interest of all Guyanese, then all parties have to be at the table in order to govern in the interest of all Guyanese. Now, it is not the most ideal form of governance. It's going to have problems. It's going to take longer to arrive at decision. But let me give you a practical example. The PPP come up, is 2 months now or a month and a half? Say they're doing this cash grant. And it looks as though now it's going to take about 5-6 months, the rate at which they're going, in order to get this thing out. Now, if we were all in the same government and at the table, yes, it would have taken us longer to agree on how much and what form the distribution should take. It would have taken us probably 2 months to get that out of the way. But at the end of 2 months, we would have agreed on a method, and then we would have rolled it out. In the end, we would have get that money to people before 5 months. The PPP is doing it on its own. Look, Clive Thomas knows more about cash transfer than anybody in Guyana. David Hinds probably know more about cash transfer than Jack Dio. Jack Dio, they said that they didn't like it. They said it was a stupid idea. So they are implementing an idea they don't believe in. And so that is why they're tripping themselves up, because they're not interested in cash transfer, Andrew. they're interested in trying to get a few votes, but more importantly, is to get a sum of money out there so that they can do the normal thieving, the normal corruption. They are not interested in cash transfer in order to get rid of poverty. How do I know that? Because we have a big section of our population that is teenage parents, 15, 16, 17-year-olds who have children, who have families, and they are locked out of this cash grant. They're locked out of it because they're not a voter. The PPP is only interested in voters. The WPA and the PNC and the AFC are interested in getting money to people to get rid of poverty.
Yeah, because people are talking about why is it that the folks who are born during 2005 or 2006 cannot benefit from the cash grant?
Because they're not voters. The PPP is interested in voters. Because for them, this thing is not about getting rid of poverty. It's about trying to get a few votes. But for us, it's about getting rid of poverty.
Right. But they might have just lost a whole hundred of thousands of votes from the young people inside because they have left them out.
Unintended consequences. That is when you don't believe in something, you'll end up not believing in anything. And it will take them probably a year to do this properly because they haven't studied it. They haven't done a pilot study. They haven't read up. They haven't studied where this thing is done, how people are able to distribute it. They haven't done anything because they do not believe in it. They do not believe in cash transfer.
So it's a facade. It's just for show.
No, we told them, look, this money was not in the budget. And so if you're going to give out this big set of money, you better go to Parliament. Why? We got to legislate everything. Only this week is where they go. Not to the Parliament and ask for supplementary. And then they realize they can't get all the money through supplementary. So they're not going to put it in next year's budget. But the WPA told you so. And instead of you listening to what we are saying, you say, oh, we are not listening to a defunct party. But your ideas are defunct. You are not a defunct party because you get half of the population vote for you. But your ideas are bankrupt. You don't know how to do anything with distributing oil resources except thieving it. When it comes to distributing it to people, you have no idea because you haven't thought it through, you haven't studied it. And that is where
they sit at the table where all parties should be sitting down and making a decision and benefit everybody.
That's you. There we go. At the WPA and the PNC and the FC being at the table, we would not have been in this mess because we know more about cash transfer than Jack Dio and Ali would ever dream to know. And we would have been able to get this thing through. People would have been able, families would have been able to get it. We know Amerindians, East Indians, Africans. We know that teenage pregnancy, children having children and having family is a reality. We may not like it, some of us who are religious and so on, but the fact of the matter that these people, these young people, make up an important section of our society. And they need to get.
And they left them out.
And they left them.
You can't get nothing.
You can't get nothing. Look at what the Surinamis. The Surinamis ain't get money in their pocket yet.
Yes. Yep. Mm-hmm.
It is just the bonus. And the Surinamis are saying, we are going to distribute that bonus amount. And as we get money, 7% of it is going to come in. The WPA said since 2018 before oil. We say take 10%, just like the Surinamis are doing.
Mm-hmm.
The Surinamis are looking at these fools over here. And they're saying, we are not falling into that trap. And so even before the Surinamis have the oil money, they've already legislated how much the people will get, 7%. And we in the WPA said 10%. And they laugh at us. Now the Surinamis are showing that you're not waiting until the oil come. You start to plan for it. 93% can go to all the other things you want to spend on. And 7% of it can go to your people. That the WPA was saying 10%. You know? Because you're projecting how much oil. When we said $5,000 per family, which is $1 million, we were projecting that at our optimum, when we get to the optimum, it will be $5,000. At that time, we were saying the optimum was about 10 billion barrels oil. Right now, it's about 11 billion, the government is saying. But we are saying, Exxon is saying, but our research showed that we have about 30 billion barrels of oil. So when Professor Thomas was saying $5,000 per household, it was based on our projection that at our peak, we are going to be able to pay our people that. But if we're not at the peak now, we do the calculations, 10% of what we get. And if it comes up to 300,000, that's what people get. And as we increase, as the price go up, people get more. If the price come down, people get less. But you legislate, and so the people know that they're going to get. And that's what the Surinamis are putting in place.
All right, well, Onyx Duncan has joined us this morning. Welcome back, Onyx. I know you're busy at another forum, another program, but thank you for joining us. We were talking about the cash grant just now, and Dr. Hinds lay out a whole set of ideas and opinions on legislation. Going all the way back to Suriname, what they're doing with their cash grant and their oil. And we also spoke about the WPA in its whole structure, how it formed itself. We also spoke about a federation system like Switzerland, where everybody have a seat at the table to decide on the best outcome on certain political decisions making in the country for the Guyanese people. And so, Dr. Hinds, I want to jump now to coalition politics. Now, do you feel that a coalition is the only tool that can be used to beat the PPPC in 2025? That's one. And what is needed to be done now, since the APNU is in limbo right now? There is no meeting. We saw a leadership challenge between Aubrey Norton and Vincent Henry. AFC left. Justice for the All Party left as well. And now I am not sure if the WPA is still a member of the APNU fraction. Give us your view. What's going on there?
WPA left the APNU since in 2024, since in 2020. We are not a member of APNU. Look, APNU was PNC and WPA. The other parties were there, but they were marginal to the process. Once the WPA left APNU, there was no APNU left. So it was only a matter of time before APNU faded away. I noticed the Guyana Action Party is now in talks with the AFC. So that's a new dynamic there, right? For all intents and purposes, APNU is dead. What you have now are three, what I would call three active opposition parties: AFC, WPA, PNC. All right? You have GAP and so on, which has a presence in the Amerindian communities. And I think the AFC courting GAP is a very good move. All right? Certainly, it can benefit us in the long run if we are a coalition. Now, look, if we are going to beat the PPP, we have to have a coalition of, at a minimum, the PNC, the WPA, and the AFC. And let me explain why. the PNC remains the largest opposition party. There's no doubt about that. However, there are people who are dissatisfied with the PNC and dissatisfied with the political process. Because we don't do polling, I can't put my finger on the percentage, but I think it could be as big as 25%. It could be as low as 10%. All right? But in order to win an election in this environment, East Indians are what is the AFC, WPA, and PNC going to tell the East Indians to make them leave the PPP en masse? The PPP has arrested that community and imprisoned it. And all they have to tell them, when you all give them your vote, then knock off your people. It's difficult. I'm not saying it's impossible. It is difficult to convince a critical mass of Indian Guyanese to naturally vote. In 2015 and 2011, the Indian Guyanese who voted for the coalition, they're really Nagamutu voters, and to some extent Ramjatan, but more Nagamutu. Nagamutu brought them. Unless we have a Nagamutu who's going to leave the PPP now and influence a section of Indian Guyanese to come over with them, we are not going to get what we got in 2011, 2015. We have to be realistic. We may get a seat, maybe two, I don't know. But in order to win, we have to maximize our support base. Get as much as we can from Amerindians. I think we got 40% of the Amerindian vote in the last two elections. If we can hold on to that, that will be good for us. We may get a seat or so from East Indians. That will be good for us. Here is the story. The turnout among Indian Guyanese has been 85% and upwards at recent elections. The turnout among African Guyanese has been around 77, 78% upwards. So we have about 20% of our support base that don't vote. That 20%, according to my calculation, represents about 5 to 6 seats. About 5 seats worth of our support base stay away from elections, either because they vex with the PNC or they vex with Alawi, and they decide to, we are battering. We won an election by 1 seat. We lost an election by 1 seat. We got 5 seats of our people, worth of our people, who out there. And we going after 1 seat from the other side and turning our backs on 5 seats in our base. And so I am saying, I have been talking to especially young Guyanese. If they were to see Nigel Hughes, Aubrey Norton, and I throw myself in there, David Hinds, together, we are going to be able, I think, to inspire some of those people who are not interested in the system, who see no hope in the system. I think we could be able to inspire at least half of them to come into the system. If we can inspire half of them, that's an extra 3 seats that we were throwing away all the time. And so therefore, I think in a practical sense, coalition makes sense. But here's the story. The last experience of coalition has not been good for small parties. The AFC had their problems with the coalition. The WPA had their problems with the coalition. Largely because the leaders of the coalition at that time felt that the coalition was the big party alone. So although the AFC had seats in government, in parliament, the WPA had one minister, 1 parliamentary seat. In effect, the big decision making was taken as if it was the big party alone.
Yes.
And so therefore, what the WPA and the FC have to do is to try to, when we go to the table, take a critical mass of public opinion with us at the table, and to say, look, we represent, and there may not be votes, we may not be able to point to votes, but we may be able to point to a set of public opinion and say, look, this time around, we are not going against the arithmetic that says the big party has to get the most of spoils, the most minister, the most. But when it comes to decision making, the decision making has to be democratically done. So although we may not potentially have 150,000 voters that we bring, when we are about to make decisions, we do so. And I think that if we're able, if the PNC leadership, the present PNC leadership, is able to come to grips with that, then I think we will be able to get an effective coalition, and we'll be able to mobilize more of our support base, and we may be able to mobilize a little bit more of people who are not in our natural base, right? So that's a big party.
Yeah.
Commitment to democratic decision making.
Like the Switzerland model. Onyx, you have a question?
I wanted to tailgate on that. I understand, Dr. Hinds, that your strategy for the upcoming 2025 elections, in regards to the current government that we have in power, is to mobilize the masses. You think that is something that is going to be effective, given how this current administration has been going around the past 2 years with buying crowd and renting crowd?
It's going to be more difficult than normal, because you now have to convince people that, look, you are going to be able to do better than these people. They will tell you these people may be scams, but they're giving we a little bread to eat. You hear that from people all the time, right? When you're not in government, you can't give your supporters anything. What you have to promise them, you're not going to their mouth. What the PPP doing is giving them bread to put in their mouth. What we have to do is to give them bread to put in both their mouth and their mind. We have to go for people's minds. The PPP going for their mouth. We have to go for their minds, their brains. So we have to convince them that the mouth could be muzzled by the food it eats. That little piece of bread, and that's Martin Carter, the mouth is muzzled by the food it eats. Those are not my words, right? So I don't want to be accused of plagiarism. But look, we have to convince these people that what the PPP is doing is playing with your mouth. What we intend to do is to free up your mind, free up your brains. That is, think of you not just as a voter, but as a
critical thinking. Yes.
Dr. Hinds, I want to follow up. There's so many talks going around for the past couple of months in regards to AFC apologizing, the opposition apologizing, in regards to 2020 elections. But we have not asked or called for Anil to apologize for that incident that happened in Monrepo. And my question is, election integrity. What measures do you believe needs to be implemented to ensure free and fair election in 2025, especially in the light of those allegations of electoral misconduct that, that we could have ventured out and say that this did happen because we saw Anil and Amna speaking to Anil and Basil was there. What measures can we put in place in light of those allegations of electoral misconduct in those previous elections in 2020?
At a minimum, we have to tackle voter impersonation. It is becoming clearer and clearer that the PPP was able to quote-unquote win the election because of voter impersonation.
That's correct.
The chairman just said she had 8,000 cases of voter impersonation in the coalition give to her. She sent a sample, one sample of 2005. It came back 173 of 2005. People were not in the country. that represents 85%. Now, if the 85% holds true, 85% of 8,000 is 6,800 votes. That's a seat and a half that the PPP potentially got through just voter impersonation. All right, they won by 1 seat, but through voter impersonation, they got. Then you go to the 47 boxes, which the legal advice of GCOM, he said, if you don't have those documents in the box, it's a breach of the law. He said that it's a breach of the law. He said, when Dennis Chabral asked him what the law says, he said the law says you must have the documents in the box, especially what we call the sensitive documents. Now, if you don't have the documents, what are you corresponding the votes in the box against? If you have 5,000 votes in the box and you got 4,000 for the PPP, 1,000 for the coalition, without the documents, how are you going to know that that is true? You see, the reason they took out the documents is that the documents would have showed less votes than what were actually in the box. So they burned the documents, they buried the documents, right? And in any country, those votes would have been cancelled because you cannot verify those votes. You cannot verify them.
Clarify so, count all.
Yes.
Clarify count all.
That's my point. So I give that prelude to say biometrics is a must because vote impersonation is too big. It's too big. Biometrics is a must. We cannot have a voters list that is the same as the population and tell me you can conduct an election like that. As a smart guy.
Dr. Hinds, of recent, the vice president would have given a feature address at Nations University and said that biometrics is illegal based on our constitution. So what do you have to say that?
Then make it legal. That's all. If it's illegal, make it legal. You have a majority in parliament. Carry a bill to parliament. The PNC already said, and the AFC said.
And in the face of making everything making Guyana a digital country, and you don't want to put biometrics in place, and he's saying that it's illegal based on the Constitution.
That's it. If they said that, I do not think that's illegal. The Constitution, while it does not say that you must have biometrics, it also does not say that you can't have biometrics. The law is not an ass. The law is not an ass. The law may not say something in clear terms, what we call numerated. You have what to call numerated powers, which are powers that are clearly stated in the Constitution. Then you have implied powers. These are implied. The Constitution says that you must have free and fair elections. And it says GCOM must conduct that election. So what it is implying is that GCOM must do everything within the legal framework. Within the legal framework to ensure free and fair election. So if GCOM says, look, in order for me to have a free and fair election, I have to have biometrics. It goes to the government and tells the government that. And the government then goes to the parliament and amend the law. That is a simple, everywhere in the world, that's how it's done. But you can't tell GCOM that it can't do it because it's not in the Constitution. Then you are telling GCOM, conduct an illegal an unfair election, a fraudulent election, and a fraudulent election is against the spirit and the letter of the Constitution. So when you are telling GCOM is telling you biometrics will help me to have a free and fair election, and you are telling them the Constitution doesn't provide it, then you are in fact saying the Constitution is condoning fraudulent election, and the Constitution does not. GCOM ultimately decides what is a free and fair election. And then, of course, after the election, if people got quarrel, you go to the court. But it's GCOM. When the court told GCOM, when they said they see Mingo do something, the court tell GCOM correct it. GCOM call a big recount and correct it. But in the process of correcting it, GCOM unearthed another set of fraud. And it's saying that fraud must go to petition. Why you didn't tell the PPP? When they come and tell you they see Mingo doing something, why you didn't tell them to go to a petition? No, you correct their complaints. But when you get a whole ton of complaints from the other side, you're telling them petition. It's double standard and it's cover up of fraud that took place there.
Dr. Hinds, I want to jump to stay on that same topic of GCOM because there's something happening here. Preparation for 2025 elections. You had Dr. Henry on your last show, and you were talking about the constitutional framework that surrounds GCOM and its elections, etc. But one, do you think GCOM in its current commissioner makeup are still needed today, or are they, or should there be some changes? Because according to my research, we had this battle in 1991 with Commissioner Sir Harold Bowers, when you had Rudy Collins as well, when they were just 3 commissioners, and today you have 6 commissioners, and a chairman who sits as the tiebreaker between the 6 commissioners, who's in the pocket of the PPP and always voting on critical issues with the government commissioner. Do you think there is a need for a new makeup of GCOM to get free and fair elections in Guyana? And how should the new makeup of GCOM be?
Let's be practical here. Eh? Let's be practical. We do not live in a society in which we have confidence in each other. PPP don't have confidence in the PNC, PNC don't have confidence in the PPP. And so both parties are going to want to be at the table to oversee the elections. I think we have to accept that fact. We can always talk about finding neutral people. Well, Claudette Singh was supposed to be neutral, and look what we end up with. Imagine if you say 7 commissioners, and you don't want the PNC and the PPP at the table. Let me get 7 neutral people. You might end up with 7 PPP people or 7 PNC people. So it's okay for the 2 sides to be at the table. I think for the system to work, it is the chair that has to be independent. And the Steve Surridge-Bally model was this. Surridge-Bally never voted. He voted once in his whole, I think, almost 10 years in the commission. When it came time to vote, Surridge-Bally would pull the 2 sides and let them come to a consensus. He did not use his casting vote. So he was a neutral chair. And that made the commission work. It made the formula that we now have work. The only time he voted was when the PPP wanted him to open the boxes. In 2015, just as Claudette did, she opened the box. The PPP wanted Surridge-Bally to open it in 2015. He voted and said, no, I am not doing it. That's the only time he voted. Other than that, it's time for consent. So the system worked to a large degree under Surridge-Bally because he was a neutral chair. How do we know he was neutral? He obviously would have voted for PNC or PPP, coalition or PPP. That's his business. But in terms of his conduct of GCOM, he didn't use his vote for one side or the other. So I like the Surridge-Bally method. That is, the chair should not use a casting vote. I would support that model to take away the casting vote from the chair.
But it might be a gridlock if both sides come.
Gridlock is better than thieving. I rather gridlock than she vote with the PPP. Because ultimately, after you shadow box, somebody got to give. Something has to give. So look, the country's not going to fall up if it take 3 months to arrive at a decision rather than 3 days. I rather we take 3 months to arrive at a decision, and it's a fair decision, than 3 days to arrive at a decision that is an unfair decision.
But Doc, would you call for the removal of the current GCOM chair before the elections? Would you call for her to be removed?
Yes.
Or
I have no confidence in her. After what she did in 2020, because I think what she did in 2020 was she participated in a cover-up of the election. You have 8,000 potential voter impersonation. You hide that from the observers. You didn't include that in your decision making, and even after the election finished, you didn't do an investigation to find out whether this 8,000 is true or not, and what you could do to ensure that it doesn't happen again. You declared an election knowing fully well that there was potential fraud. If one out of that 8,000, if one person out of that 8,000 was not in the country at the time of voting, it was a breach of the law. If half of that 8,000 was not, it would change the outcome of the election. That is how serious it is. The government won, the PPP won by 1 seat. So if half, 4,000 of those voters were not in the country, it would have changed the outcome of the country. You sit there, you know that potentially that could happen, and you declare an election. Oh no. If you said, based on the raw count, this is what is here. But the recount change everything. A valid vote is a vote that is not spoiled. In a normal election, you vote and it's not spoiled. Once you go to the recount, the definition of a valid vote changes. A valid vote now becomes whether the vote was legally put in the box or not. That's why you open the box. You open the box to see whether the votes in there were legal or not. And you find out that some of them were not legal. So a valid vote is no longer an unspoiled vote. It is whether the vote in the box was done according to the rules and the laws. And the recount show that some of them were not.
I
have no confidence in her.
I wanna just separate or go off track a little. With this current government and their foreign policy, how do you think, or how do you see the current government's foreign policy affecting its credibility and chances in the coming elections, especially with regards to the relationship that we have with US, China, and regional partners?
Foreign policy don't decide Guyanese elections.
But with this government, we know truly.
The foreign policy becomes important, not for the voter consumption. The foreign policy becomes important for the behavior of external forces. Now, external forces have always played a role in our elections. From 1957 to the present, let's not fool ourselves. They either directly or indirectly influence the outcome of our elections. And so your foreign policy is really catered to them rather than to our people, because we don't vote on foreign. It doesn't influence our vote internally. Now, if the PPP decide that they're going to play ball with the Chinese and offend the Americans, then that could have implications for our country. If they decide that they're going to go with the American way and not play ball with the Chinese and the Russians, it will have implications for us. So the foreign policy of a government or a party in Guyana will have implications for the external forces and how they behave towards us.
Dr. Hinds, we're out of time, but I have one last question for you. But you just alluded to the meeting between GATT and the AFC, but should Nigel Hughes call you to a meeting on that same point, bilateral talks, would you go? As leader of the WPA, would you attend that?
Yes.
Onyx?
Or you would be calling Nigel? Which one? I don't know.
And if Norton calls me, I'll be attending the meeting too. I'm a coalition man. I don't have that problem. You see, I don't want to be the presidential candidate for a coalition. So I am free. Right? But if Nigel Hughes calls me to talk about a grouping of quote-unquote third parties, I will attend that meeting. If Aubrey Norton calls me to talk about a larger coalition of smaller parties and the PNC, I will attend that meeting. The more, the merrier.
But going forward, so you were up to coalition politics. You're definitely in if, okay.
All right, that's my last question. Honestly, any more questions before we go?
I had one more question. Where is it? All right, post-elections, post-election scenarios, no matter the outcome, what do you think are the most critical issues that the next government will need to address immediately after 2025 elections? And we've been saying this after every elections.
How to bring our country together. No government, whether it's a coalition government or the PPP government, is going to be able to move this country 1 inch without bringing the country together. We have to find a governance model to bring the country together. We have shown on the opposition side that as big and bad as the PPP is, as ruthless as they are, we have shown that we can manage them. All right? And we must not believe that if we were to get into office, they're not going to be able to manage us. All right? We have to be practical about politics. After the fighting is over, after the slug-out is over, we have to find a way to govern the country together. That is the big challenge. There are all kinds of models, you know. Andrew and I discussed the Switzerland model. That's not the only model. Suriname has a model just across the border from us here. All right?
That's correct.
There are all kinds of models. But when I hear Jack Dio says, opposition can be on the procurement commission, opposition can be this, or the opposition has to say, are you God? Eh? Are you saying that the opposition are less than human beings, so they don't have the capacity to adapt, and you have to sign off and to say, you all have changed and you all have go to hell. You have absolutely no interest right now in governing this country in a democratic way. So what we have to do is to win an election, get you out of office, and when you're out of office, bring you screaming by your so-and-so to the table. Because by yourself, with power in your hand, you tell yourself that it's you alone born to run this country. So we have to get you out of the way by an election and then find a democratic process by which you come in as an equal. You are not superior to me. You are not superior. The PPP is not superior to the PNC, the AFC, the WPA. Indian Guyanese are not superior to Africans or Amerindians. Jack Diop definitely not superior to Aubrey Norton and Nigel Hughes, and I dare say David Hinds. So we have to win election, create a democratic environment, and then the PPP bring them in so we can run our country together and free our people up from this prison we've been in.
I'm happy that you ended on that note. And the democracy is one thing, and that's what the PPP don't believe in, because the democracy and good governance is inclusive and participatory. And if we don't all participate, we'll not be able to have a democratic country. So thank you so much for that, Dr. Hinds.
Dr. Hinds, thank you very much for being on the program this afternoon. This morning it's 11:30. We went half an hour, well, 10 minutes over the time, according to my clock. So, Doc, we're going to see you back again, because we're not done with you as yet. And we're going to get you back again sometime in the new year. But on behalf of all of us here, if we haven't seen you for Christmas, we want to wish you and your family, season greetings to you as well.
And good luck.
Season greetings, Doctor.
Good luck on the program. We need more of this. The more, the merrier. When we don't have formal power, we have to create avenues of informal power, and then
exactly
into the formal. Thank you all very much, gentlemen.
Thank you.
It's good
Dr.
to see
Hinds.
Good to see young people taking
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Yes,
that's Dr. David Hinds there, the presidential candidate for the WPA. He's one of the co-leaders of the WPA. And we want to thank all of you for listening. We should have another guest. I invited the opposition leader to be on the program. I sent him a message on WhatsApp about to call him and ask him if he's going to be on the show. To get him in on the countdown. We also have the former Minister of Finance, Winston Jordan, scheduled to be on the program in December. We also have the General Secretary of the Ghana Teachers Union, Greta McDonald, recently graduated with a master's degree, to be on the show as well. So we have a big lineup before the year end, Onyx.
Yes. I can't wait. Those are three big names in politics, and I can't wait to have them here at the countdown.
All right. Thank you very much, Onyx. Thank you all for being on the show. We're going to get back to the cricket now, because like I said before, I'm at the stadium. I'm just right over there and seeing the whole match next to me. So we're going to get back to the cricket and see you back here tonight as well. It's going to be cricket. The Ghana Amazon Warriors is playing tonight. See them right here at the Providence Stadium, and we're going to see you back here next week for another edition of the Countdown. Goodbye.